Hello, this is Pastor Gordon Finlay from Omimi Baptist Church. Welcome to a short retelling of the main events of Good Friday. For Christians, Good Friday is one of the very most important days in the Christian year. It sometimes is called Holy Friday or Great Friday, a time to reflect and to meditate on Jesus' suffering and death for the sin of humanity. In retelling this story, we have narrated it in 7 main segments, perhaps like the acts of a play. Each segment is introduced with a familiar hymn long associated with the events of Good Friday about 2,000 years ago. The betrayal. Judas Iscariot went to the authorities and asked, "What are you willing to give me, and I will hand him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From that time onwards, Judas looked for an opportunity to betray him. That opportunity came in the Garden of Gethsemane when Jesus had been praying with 3 of his disciples. The betrayer had arranged a signal by which he would identify Jesus for arresting. "The one that I kiss, that is the man, arrest him." And so it was. The trial of Jesus by the Jewish leaders. Jesus was led away first to a former high priest, Annas, and then to Caiaphas, the current high priest. The Sanhedrin council met at Caiaphas's home and made the decision that Jesus should be put to death on accusations of blasphemy and claiming to be equal with God. During the trial, a large fire in the courtyard helped people to stay warm. And among them, unrecognized, was Jesus' disciple, Peter. A young servant girl saw him and accused him of being one of Jesus' disciples, but he denied it. A little later, another servant girl saw him and identified him as having been with Jesus of Nazareth, and this time he denied it with an oath. Again, a little later, others noticed his accent as being from Galilee and accused him of being one of Jesus' followers. This time he cursed and swore as he denied it. At that moment, the rooster crowed, as Jesus had prophesied in advance to Peter. Peter went outside and wept bitterly. The trial by Pilate and Herod. The Romans reserved the right to decide on the death penalty themselves. So the Jewish leaders sent Jesus to Pilate demanding his death. Pilate examined him and found no fault in him, and he referred him over to Herod Antipas, who happened to be in Jerusalem for the Passover. Herod tried to interrogate him, but returned him without accusation to Pilate. Pilate now determined to release Jesus, but the Jewish authorities persisted in demanding the death penalty. And so Pilate publicly washed his hands, stating that he had no responsibility for their decision. And then, after having Jesus flogged, he handed him over to be crucified. The procession to the place of crucifixion. Roman crucifixions took place in a public place where a maximum of people would see them as a deterrent to rebellion. The crosses normally were carried by the victims, and in this instance, Simon of Cyrene was coming into the city, and the authorities and the soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. The route was along the Via Crucis, or known as the Via Dolorosa. And because of the weight of the cross, we understand the procession would halt a number of times to allow the victim to rest briefly. Some branches of the Christian Church claim that there were 14 stopping points, known to them as Stations of the Cross. The Crucifixion. Crucifixion has been described as the most cruel, inhumane form of death devised by mankind. Jesus was crucified between two criminals. His words spoken from the cross showed that even in such an impossible situation, he bore no ill will towards his persecutors. As the hour of death approached, he prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over everything. And then, shortly afterwards, Jesus commended his spirit into the hands of his heavenly Father and passed on. Mysterious events that happened at Jesus' crucifixion time. Matthew's Gospel tells us of a number of things that happened at the time that Jesus died. For example, the gigantic veil in the temple separating the holy place from the Holy of Holies was mysteriously torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split, perhaps an earthquake, and some tombs broke open. Now, following Jesus' resurrection, some righteous people whose tombs had broken open when Jesus died appeared to many in Jerusalem. The burial of Jesus. As evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, two prominent leaders, gained the permission of Pilate to remove Jesus' body from the cross. They wrapped it in clean linen, interspersed with spices customary at burial. They then carried and placed it in Joseph's own new tomb, which was carved out of the rock. The tomb was sealed with a large wheel of rock that possibly weighed about 4 tons.